So you're a minarchist. Is it because you are aware of the immorality of a small group of people who may or most likely may not know you, enforcing their decisions upon others? The immorality of a small group of individuals unilaterally claiming partial ownership over others? Or is it because you understand the inefficiency naturally attached to governments as a result of perverse incentives which cannot be dealt with within the state? Because of the inherent incapacity of governments to allocate resources in the most efficient way possible? Or is it both? I hope it is because of inefficiency of resource allocation, because there is no way of reconciling a position where you recognize the immorality of a government forcing us to buy certain products or services while forbidding us from buying others, where you recognize the immorality of a third party that is not involved in a transaction to be able to tax that transaction, with a position where the same group of individuals can morally somehow run some of the most important aspects of our lives. If you think it is immoral for a group of people to impose prices and production standards in the pencil industry or haircutting industry, how is it moral in the case of justice or security? In fact, if it is immoral for a government to tell us who we can buy pencils from and who we cannot, or to set the prices we need to pay for them or force the parties involved to pay them a percentage in taxes, then it is incredibly more immoral for them to have a monopoly on the use of force in the name of security. Now, keep in mind that even if they do allow for private security companies, it is still a monopoly in the sense that it is the state that grants that permission to such companies. It is the state, the one with the ultimate say about such things. How is it moral for them to unilaterally decide what is just and what is not? How can it be immoral for a guy in Washington to tell me that I must buy health insurance, for example, but perfectly moral for him to pick and choose what is a threat to my security and what is not, and then use my money to defend me from it on their terms? Now, if you're a minarchist because you understand the economics of state intervention and you just can't figure out how the justice system would work without the state, then think about this. The state imposing a judicial system intrinsically means the initiation of force against everyone. Imposing a judicial system is no different than imposing anything else. It is unjust. Now, how would a justice system work when it is fundamentally based upon injustice? Also, think of this. If incentives are not aligned correctly for the state to intervene in the markets, if it makes no economic sense to have the state sell ice cream or cars, or to force those who sell them to abide by their rules, then how do we go from that to think that the state is most efficient when dealing with security and justice? Now, think about this. Do you think that your inability to imagine how a justice system or a security force would work without the state is enough to, number one, conclude that they cannot work without the state, and number two, they must be imposed upon everyone else? Do you think that the market is good at bringing out the best ideas for cell phones and software, but the same principle would not work with security and justice? Was the fact that you did not come up with the idea of Twitter enough for Twitter not to exist? On the contrary, it is precisely because the idea was so unique and brought so much value to society that it became so successful. I have many ideas about how justice and security would work in the context of freedom, and yet I am just one man. There are 7,000 millions of us out there, or in English terms, 7 billion people on Earth. I tend to think I have some pretty good ideas, but I would not be surprised if someone else out there has a better idea than I do, and I am always open for suggestions. May the best idea win, right? Well, let's apply the same principle to all areas of human interaction instead of coming up with arbitrary exceptions.